Good afternoon. This is Dimitri Lascaris coming to you from Kalamata, Greece on September 12, 2024. I'm pleased to be joined with my regular guest, Laith Marouf, geopolitical analyst extraordinaire from Beirut, Lebanon, executive director of Free Palestine TV, doing very important reporting, not only from South Lebanon and other areas of the country, but also now from the occupied West Bank. Laith, thank you for joining me again today.
Thank you for having me. It's so great always to be with you.
So Laith, why don't you start by updating us about key developments in the war that has been raging in the south of the country since October of last year, and particularly focusing on things that happened since we last spoke, I believe was on September 1st.
Yeah, I mean, right now there is an increase in the size of weapons that are being used by Hezbollah and the number of attacks or shells used or drones used in these attacks. So now it's averaging around 100 missiles, projectiles a day, and dozens of drones. This is much higher than it was even just a month ago, before the retaliation of Hezbollah to the assassination of General Shukr. And at the same time, we've seen multiple drones and F-16s or F-15s that have been chased by Hezbollah's air defenses. So that also indicates a change in operation. And finally, we've seen a huge decrease in the numbers of martyrs being announced by Hezbollah. And that shows you also, again, a change in the operations of the military wing, the Islamic resistance in Lebanon, since the assassination of Shukr. It used to be before, that we would see 2 martyrs a day. Now we're passing 3-4 days before we hear of another martyr. And this has pushed the Zionists into targeting more and more civilian infrastructure and civilians themselves. For instance, the Israelis targeted a firefighting crew with their truck that were trying to put out a fire in a forest that was started by white phosphorus shells thrown by the Israelis. So the Israelis targeted a civilian vehicle, and inside the vehicle was a UNIFIL worker who was traveling back from the base with his cousin back to home, and both of them were martyred. The UNIFIL leadership in Lebanon issued a statement of condolences to the family and acknowledged that this is their employee and condemned the targeting of UNIFIL workers. Now, if we look at how the Israelis are conducting their military activities in the last week here in Lebanon, we can see that it matches how they're conducting their military activities in Gaza. When they are unable to actually defeat their enemy or kill fighters that are fighting them, they resort to targeting civilians and United Nations and international agencies that they can harm. And so in the case that happens on a daily basis in Gaza for the last 10, 11 months now, and it is also now happening more often in South Lebanon because the Israelis are unable to reach Hezbollah members anymore. And that's because of the change in the operation, how Hezbollah is conducting its activities. And finally, I would say the last thing that can show you this is how they have now purposefully, the Israelis started attacking other resistance factions in Lebanon. If they can't reach Hezbollah, they will assassinate a leader of Fatah, as happened. And Fatah, of course, is collaborating with the Israelis inside the West Bank, but they don't mind killing some of their leadership in Lebanon, the Israelis, as to show their viciousness. This is the only mode of operandi like that the Zionists have, is to purposefully project that they are a wild dog, that they are rabid dog, to scare their enemies. And that's actually, may have worked, in the 1950s or whatever. Today, it doesn't work. Everybody knows you are a rabid dog, which means that you can't design tactical maneuvers that can actually achieve strategic goals. You can just bark and bite.
And during the past 10 days, have the Islamic resistance targeted any military sites that had not previously been targeted? I heard that there was a report, I'm not sure if this was verified, that they attacked an airbase for the first time. Have you received information along those lines?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have the list of bases that they attacked in front of me, but I can tell you that on a daily basis, they have been hitting major bases. And one of these attacks, when I was saying that the Hezbollah has increased the load of its explosive heads, they hit a major base around the Meron hill or mountain in the Galilee, and with the heaviest Falak missile yet. And the explosion was so big that the whole base is basically flattened. And all of the north of Palestine in the Galilee, all of the colonists reported, their homes shaking. So this was a explosive head on the scale of what the Israelis are using with their air raids. So it's very heavy load, and it is now kind of giving signals to what Hezbollah has as capabilities. And they've targeted, at least in the last week, 10 different bases in the Golan Heights in North Palestine. And that included many new bases that they haven't yet hit. So they've included at least 3 new bases on the list of targets that they are now targeting, and at least 4 new colonies that haven't been targeted yet before. So the range of targets is widened. The size of the weapons explosiveness is increased. The number of weapons being fired in each volley is also increased, and this is now at a rate that actually is larger than the rate of what Hezbollah was doing in 2006 in the midst of the war against the Zionists. Hezbollah was not firing 1,000 missiles a day. Now they are. So and the Israelis still don't admit that this is a full-out war. Nobody wants to admit it's a full-out war, but it's a war of attrition, and it's on a scale that hasn't been seen yet.
So, Laith, on Monday of this week, so that would be September 9th, Nissim Vaturi, a Likud member of Israel's Knesset, claimed that it is a matter of days, those were his words, before full-on war erupts between Israel and Hezbollah. Vaturi is a member of the Knesset's Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee. He told the Israeli public broadcaster that when the all-out war happens, Beirut's Dahia suburb, a major Hezbollah stronghold, quote, will look like Gaza, close quote. Vaturi has faced heavy criticism in the past for multiple comments calling for Gaza to be burned, and for asserting in January of this year that there are no innocent Palestinian civilians left in the Strip. So apparently Vaturi considers even babies to be legitimate military targets for the genocidal regime. Now, we have heard, of course, repeated threats by Israel to devastate Lebanon and inflict on it Gaza-like suffering. 4 days have elapsed since this claim that all-out war was going to happen in a matter of days. Of course, the situation could change at any time. But Laith, every single time I've been to the southern border, and I've been there numerous times in the last 11 months, including with you, I can't recall a single time when I actually saw an Israeli soldier, not even one, even though I regularly saw and was close enough to see Israeli military bases. It's as though they won't even show their faces. They won't go out into the public or be visible to the Islamic resistance. It's quite hard to imagine that if they're that fearful of showing themselves, the Israeli soldiers in the north of occupied Palestine, that they are capable and willing to launch a full-scale ground invasion into South Lebanon. Have you seen or learned of any military movements or developments in northern occupied Palestine which would suggest that this is real and not simply another empty threat?
Well, look, we have not detected any changes in the positions of the Israeli military in North Palestine. So no, they're not ready for an invasion or what have you. They could be ready for an air bombardment at any moment. That's something that, you know, we just send the airplanes out. You don't have to move troops on the ground, if just like you need to do when there is a ground invasion. So no, this is not anytime soon. The other thing that I would say is that because of Hezbollah increasing the range and the targets and the size and all these things that we spoke about already, now on a daily basis, 100,000 Israelis are rushing into their bunkers. This is above and beyond the 100, 200,000, nobody knows the numbers exactly, that already left the north of occupied Palestine. So, you know, if last month it was an average of 60,000 Israelis in the north going into bunkers, now we're talking about 100,000. It means that you've included cities like Naharia in this, and especially because there's been multiple drones that hit Naharia over the last few days. So we're now talking about not only the little towns or villages, we're talking about the major cities on the Mediterranean coast, just north of Haifa, that are seeing their members living there, their colonists rush into bunkers every few hours. So this is a change, and of course this is pressuring the Israelis. I would say also one last thing about the possibilities of this regional war, or at least war with Hezbollah breaking out. You know, there is the pressure on the ground inside the West Bank, the pressure inside Gaza, that, you know, and the continued Israeli attacks on Syria, for instance, and Lebanon, that put pressures also on Hezbollah to you know, increase the level of escalation. And so we may find that Hezbollah is the one that actually triggers something bigger. We also are still waiting for Iran's response. It's 2 months now, and it must be cooking on slow burner, but it's coming. So that could trigger a war with Lebanon, because the Israelis don't have the capabilities to hit back at Iran, so they may hit on Lebanon. So, you know, yes, it's a lot of bluster by the Zionists. They don't have the capabilities, but we may find ourselves in that situation, even with nobody wanting it to be.
Mm-hmm. So this week, the world witnessed another sordid spectacle of a U.S. presidential debate. You know, not surprisingly, a core line of attack from Kamala Harris is that Donald Trump is a pathological liar, which of course is true. What sane human being would deny that? What is not said in the mainstream media is that Kamala Harris is also a pathological liar. And the one thing that and of course, so too is Joe Biden and every other elite figure within the Democratic and Republican Party. There's no honesty to be found in any of these characters, as far as I can tell. But after having watched this sordid spectacle, I forced myself to, you know, watch 2 U.S. presidential debates in the last 2 months. I'm still recovering from this, but my first impression of it was that the moderators were extraordinarily biased. I was quite surprised as somebody who spent over 30 years litigating, and, sort of debate is my livelihood. It's my bread and butter. It's what I do in a court of law. I was sort of very struck by this. These ABC talking heads were supposed to be perfectly neutral, but what they did was they repeatedly called out Donald Trump for his lies. In one instance, he claimed, for example, that illegal immigrants were eating the pets of people in some district of Illinois. And the ABC host interjected and said, well, I actually called the city manager and I asked him if there are any reports of illegal immigrants eating the pets of locals, and he told me he's not aware of any. So he had actually gone out and made efforts, prepared himself to debunk Donald Trump's lies, but he didn't do that at all with respect to Kamala Harris. And in my opinion, the most egregious lies that were uttered during that debate were the ones about Palestine and Israel. And so in order to, I think, break this down and sort of understand the depth of the dishonesty in the US political elite when it comes to the subject of Palestine, I wanted to play a game with you for our audience, and it's called True or False. And I'm going to show you now, and our audience.
I think you're breaking the hearts of many of our audience. They probably wanted truth or dare,
We'll save that for a subsequent episode. So I'm going to play for you now the question that was put to Kamala Harris by one of the moderators on Israel and Palestine, and then we will pause as she responds and test the veracity of her statements. So here we go.
President Harris, in December, you said, quote, Israel has a right to defend itself, but you added, quote, it matters how, saying international humanitarian law must be respected. Israel must do more to protect innocent civilians. You said that 9 months ago. Now an estimated 40,000 Palestinians are dead. Nearly 100 hostages remain. Just last week, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said there's not a deal in the making. President Biden has not been able to break through the stalemate. How would you do it?
Well, let's understand how we got here. On October 7, Hamas, a terrorist organization, slaughtered 1,200 Israelis.
Let's remember how we got here. On October 7th, blank. How do you respond to the claim that we got here starting on October 7th?
Of course, it didn't start there. It started with the creation of Zionism. It started with the colonial project and the occupation of Palestine by the British and the Balfour Declaration that followed. All of those things, even before the creation of the Zionist colony itself in 1948, there was already an ethnic cleansing campaign, a genocide, a subjugation campaign of the Palestinian population by the British. And so, no, I know that the West has trained its citizens to have very short memory span, to only look at the latest flashing light as the beginning of stories. And that's a problem, of course, for not only Palestine, but all the human history that of relations with the West. And definitely Hamas did not kill 1,200 Israeli citizens. The vast majority of those that were killed that first off were military or police, and secondly, the vast majority of the quote-unquote non-armed people, I wouldn't want to call them civilians because they're colonists, were killed by Israeli forces, helicopters and tanks that were given the order to kill any Israeli or Palestinian that's trying to cross back into Gaza, to make sure that there is no prisoners of war at the hands of the resistance that they can exchange with Palestinian prisoners of war. And that's, of course, known as the Hannibal Directive. That was, and so many sources already talked about that. But how Zionists talk about modern blood libel against Israel. Well, truly, the modern blood libel is against the Palestinians, the Arabs, the Muslims who, as Edward Said told us in his book Orientalism, published in the 70s of the last century, had all the racist stereotypes and connotations that the European Christians and secular individuals had against Jewish Europeans dumped on us. Let's hear some more lies.
Okay.
Let's hear more lies.
Next clip.
Many of them young people who were simply attending a concert. Women were horribly raped.
Laith, true or false? Women were horribly raped.
No, false. There's no evidence of that.
Let's continue.
And so absolutely, I said then, I say now, Israel has a right to defend itself. We would.
True or false, Laith? Israel has a right to defend itself.
No occupier has the right to defend themselves, and definitely no one on this planet has the right to genocide peoples, to ecocide, to scholasticide, to femicide, to infanticide. Those are all things that are forbidden to anybody, let alone in a defense situation from an occupier who doesn't have the right to defend themselves against their people that they occupy.
And let's move on.
Because it is also true, far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. Children, mothers.
So do you think that the U.S. government and the Biden administration, and Kamala Harris in particular, actually care about the fact that far too many, as though there's some number of innocent Palestinians being killed, is acceptable? Let's just park that for a moment. But do you think they actually care about the number of innocent Palestinians who have been killed? Is that true?
No, of course, that's a lie itself. And we know that the American elite are bloodthirsty, and we've seen them kill millions of people, 1.5 million people in Iraq, to continue to occupy the oil resources till today. And the numbers are, we've heard before Foreign Affairs Minister or Secretary of State, as they call them in the US, Madeleine Albright, saying 500,000 Iraqi children is a worth it price. The price of imperialism is not, there's no price for imperialism. That is not too high for imperialism for the West. And I would say, finally, that, Gaza is the one that has the right to defend itself. The Palestinians are the ones that have the right to defend themselves.
Let's continue.
What we know is that this war must end. It must end immediately, and the way it will end is we need a ceasefire deal and we need the hostages out.
Laith, do you believe it's true or false that the U.S. government is endeavoring to secure a ceasefire deal in good faith?
No, it's not. The U.S. is protecting its jewel and its imperial crown, and it wants as many Palestinians to be slaughtered as possible. If it wants to stop this war, all it has to do is stop the deliveries of weapons. If there's, at least 2 plane loads of weapons being delivered a day by the Americans and a shipload, that's how much weapons are arriving every day to maintain the pace of slaughter that we see in Gaza, the West Bank, and the borders here with Lebanon. And so if the US just stops one of those planes or ships, it will have a significant impact on Israeli activities.
So we will continue to work around the clock on that. Work around the clock, also understanding that we must chart a course for a 2-state solution.
Laith, is it true or false that the U.S. is charting a course to a 2-state solution?
Look, the 2-state solution maybe is at the end of a double rainbow. So it's as elusive as the pot of gold that the leprechaun has at the end of one rainbow. This is a figment of imagination. Anyone that wants to believe in that, they might as well believe in Santa, okay? This is the reality. You should just sit down and wait and not buy anybody gifts on Christmas because Santa is going to deliver it to you. Just like Santa, the USA, is supposed to deliver the Palestinians right now for since 1990, 30 somewhat years. They're supposed to deliver them that Christmas gift called Palestine as a state, and it's never going to happen.
Let's continue.
And in that solution, there must be security for the Israeli people and Israel, and in equal measure for the Palestinians.
Laith, is it true or false that the U.S. government wants as much security for Palestinians as it wants for Israelis?
No, the U.S. thinks of Palestinians as the most dangerous people on this planet because we are educated, we're capable, and we're unyielding. Okay, we're stubborn people, right? Other peoples have given up. This is why the purposeful intent destruction of Palestinian culture and institutions that we see that the Israelis doing with American approval and guidance and appointing of targets. In fact, earlier today, there was a meeting called by the Ministry of Education and the UNRWA schools in Gaza, where all the most important education experts still alive in Gaza were meeting together to prepare for the school year to begin, to find a way to educate the Palestinian children in the midst of the slaughter. And what did the Israelis do? They bombed the meeting. They killed the top 10 or 12 education experts all at once. And this meeting was called by the UNRWA. Okay, so this is what Israel wants to do. This is what the United States wants to do. They want to defeat the will of the people of Palestine, and I think they met their match.
But the one thing I will assure you always, I will always give Israel the ability to defend itself, in particular as it relates to Iran and any threat that Iran and its proxies pose to Israel.
Yeah, this is the first time she says something truthful.
Yes,
right?
It's out of my mouth, man. She actually told the truth. I think that was there were 6 lies preceded by 1 bit of truth. Sorry, go ahead.
Basically, the sun and the moon and the stars and everything above and below the heavens and in the inferno, they'll give it all to Israel. Whatever it wants, as long as it stays as a good, important part of the imperial order. And that's the truth.
So let's move on to a different subject, obviously related to the genocide, but one that I think merits some comment today, and that was the recent visit of the German foreign minister to Amman, Jordan. I'm going to play for you an exchange which the Jordanian foreign minister had with Annalena Baerbock, the German foreign minister, at a press conference following their meetings in Amman.
تطبيق القانون الدولي، تطبيق القانون الدولي الإنساني، ومكانة ألمانيا والقيم الألمانية تفرض على ألمانيا اتخاذ خطوات واضحة فيما يتعلق بفرض عقوبات على الحكومة الإسرائيلية وعلى المسؤولين الإسرائيليين الذين يبثون ثقافة الكراهية ويحرضون على القتل ويبررون قتل الأبرياء ويدفعون المنطقة كلها باتجاه التصعيد. وبكل صراحة أقول إذا قطعت الكهرباء عن مخيمات اللجوء نتيجة عدم توفر الدعم الذي تحتاجه المنظمات الأممية، فنحن لن نوفر الكهرباء لأننا لا نستطيع. مسؤوليتنا الأولى هي باتجاه شعبنا، ونحن نواجه ظروف اقتصادية صعبة، كان لغزة آثار اقتصادية مدمرة على اقتصادنا، وبالتالي نحن دولة إمكاناتنا محدودة وعلينا أن نتعامل وفق أولوياتنا.
Es braucht einen dauerhaften Frieden in der Region und es braucht vor allen Dingen eine Zwei-Staaten-Lösung. Die Realität ist aber leider, dass der Nahe und Mittlere Osten nur ein Wimpernschlag von der Katastrophe entfernt ist. Intensiven diplomatischen Bemühungen der internationalen Gemeinschaft ist es zu verdanken, dass die Funken, die überall sprühen, bislang keinen Flächenbrand entfacht haben. Deutschland stellt dafür weitere 50 Millionen Euro an humanitärer Hilfe für die Vereinten Nationen und internationale Nichtregierungsorganisationen zur Verfügung.
So, Laith, that seemed to me to be the rhetorical equivalent of two ships passing in the night. You know, the Jordanian foreign minister saying, look, you should be imposing sanctions on these lunatics. Why aren't you sanctioning people, even those who are openly calling for the genocide of the Palestinian people? And Elena Baerbock, who once called on the Russian government to change its course 360 degrees, and who will never live down that striking statement, she threw out a few crumbs to the Palestinian people living in Gaza and announced another 50 million euros in aid, amounting since the genocide began in October to about $360 million, or euros, I should say, in aid to the people of Gaza. Putting aside the question of whether any of that aid could actually get through to the people of Gaza, given the behavior of the diabolical Zionist regime, that is a drop in the bucket compared to the 35 billion euros that Germany has allocated to Ukraine since 2022. What do you make of this exchange, Laith? And one thing I really am interested to hear your comments on is, I don't understand the Jordanian government to have imposed sanctions on Israel. And yet the Jordanian foreign minister is calling on Germany to do that. What do you make of all of this?
You know, when you were talking about two ships not meeting, I was like, oh, well, then the propaganda was successful, even to get a person like you who's very, you know, seasoned, to think that there is some friction between the Germans and the Jordanians. Look, if you notice, his message was two parts. One, oh, you know, Germany is supposed to be a human rights leader. Why aren't you sanctioning these people taking the lead as usual? By the way, also, this is the second part, we have all these Palestinian refugees inside Jordan. We're going to, not enough money to run their electricity, and we're going to cut it because we're going to take care of our citizens. And she responds with, here's 55 million, and it's not going to go to Gaza, it's going to go to Jordan, right? So they played it well, and Jordan, the economy of Jordan, actually, since beginning of 1992 and the Iraq-Kuwait war, shifted to becoming a, you know, the major money funnel coming into the country is taking care of refugees and at least you know, siphoning the majority of it. So there's a huge part of the elite class that all they do is they're creating these NGOs and so forth. And you know, you had the waves of Iraqi refugees, then the waves of Syrian refugees. You have also, of course, the permanent wave of Palestinian refugees and so on. And all these, you know, money right now going to Gaza, you're seeing the Jordanian government officials jumping to the front of the line saying, let us be the ones that are managing it, and doing an overhead of 80%. You know, this is what they do to the Syrian refugee money and the Iraqi refugee money, and now they're doing it to the Palestinians. So, and finally, I would say the first part of his speech was also directed towards the Jordanian public. And why? Because we saw the Jordanian truck driver cross the you know, Karama crossing, the Alimbi King Hussein Bridge, and shoot 3 Israeli border officers point blank in the head. And that was a huge pressure on the state, because now, you know, he comes, this man, that Hijazi that was martyred in his operation, comes from one of the biggest tribes in Jordan, and they are Jordanian, not Palestinian. And you see how in the speech of the foreign affairs minister, he purposefully also started inserting this Jordan first situation to try to trigger some problems between Jordanians that consider that they have some Palestinian background and those who consider themselves pure, or whatever you want to call that doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm. I just want to point out that the attack at the Allenby Bridge happened actually 2 or 3 days after this visit by Annalena Baerbock. So if the intention of the Jordanian foreign minister was to calm down the popular outrage within Jordan at the genocide, that doesn't seem to have been particularly effective. And that is actually the last thing I wanted to ask you about today, this event at the Allenby Bridge. And by the way, if you look at the media reports, it's interesting. Most of them described the 3 killed Israelis as civilians. But if you read the fine print, you'll find out that they were actually border guards. And they're guards of an illegal occupation. They have no right. They're violating international law by restricting traffic, the flows of humans and goods into and out of the West Bank. So they are not civilians. They are not innocent. From my perspective as a lawyer, they were legitimate targets for those who are living under occupation or trying to liberate the oppressed people from occupation. But putting all of that aside, do you think this is a sign of this situation in Jordan becoming uncontrollable, or do you think this is more likely to be a one-off? As far as I know, this is the deadliest attack by a Jordanian on Israeli targets since October of last year.
Yes, it is the deadliest attack by a Jordanian on Israelis in decades. And I would say it was building up to this. And clearly the Jordanian public is boiling. And we saw the results of it also in the elections yesterday and the day before in Jordan. The, you know, anti-government, you know, current government coalition won the majority of the seats, and that includes, you know, Hamas kind of affiliated groups and so on. So all the liberal options that were put in front of the Palestinian, the Jordanian population lost. So now the question is what's going to happen within the parliament, because the king still appoints the government without consulting with the parliament. And how's that the relationship of the new parliament going to be with this new government? And, you know, to emphasize how important this action was by this Jordanian truck driver. You know, he comes from this tribe, and he's related to the most important, you know, war hero in Jordan, a general that revolted against the father, King Hussein, in 1968. The Israelis tried to invade that area called Karame, which means dignity, cross the river, the Jordan River, to get to Palestinian fighters. And the King Hussein at the time told the general Hijazi not to stop, not to fight back the Israelis, to let them cross the river and slaughter the Palestinian resistance. And that general cut the phone line and attacked the Israeli invaders and defeated them. And that was the only time that Jordan ever defeated the Israeli military. And so you could, you know, there is a lot of symbolism to this action by Hijazi, the truck driver. And it is definitely threatening the stability of the government. And, you know, we will continue, maybe the Americans and the West will give more leeway for the king and the government in Jordan to say things that are pro-Palestinian, just to defend themselves from the boiling pressure.
Mm-hmm. One other thing about this, the implications of this, Laith, I understand that this led to a closure of all border crossings between Jordan and occupied Palestine for at least a few days, but I understand at least under certain restrictions they've been reopened. I've seen reports that Jordan basically became a conduit for a lot of goods that Israel was receiving through maritime transportation before the Ansar Allah forces effectively shut down maritime transportation through the Red Sea to the port of Eilat. So if those border crossings are closed on a more sustained basis, I would imagine that's going to cause significant economic problems for Israel potentially, wouldn't it?
Oh, yes, the supply line that the West and its vessels here in the region created to replace the Red Sea Eilat port supply line went through the Emirates to Saudi to Jordan to the colony. And of course, they felt that day of the action and a few days that was closed after the border, people in the inside the Zionist colony felt it on their shelves in their supermarkets because, number one, the Jordanians are the biggest vegetable supplier to the colony, and therefore the king of tomato, as they call him, couldn't deliver his tomatoes. You know, other things like electronics and parts coming from China through the Emirates and so on also were affected. So now think about what could happen if other actions like this multiply. Before also this action was taken by the martyr Hijazi, and you know, there was multiple times where demonstrators and residents of the border area between occupied Palestine and Jordan demonstrated at the border crossings, including in the south of the country where this martyr came from, and tried to block the trucks from entering the Zionist colony. And they got beaten up and rounded and arrested, the local residents and the demonstrators that came from outside the regions to support them. And this is in comparison, of course, to the Zionist colonists blocking all aid from coming into Gaza and being supported by the Israeli military and security forces to loot and vandalize any aid that comes into Gaza. So you see the comparison. So now this action, this armed militant action by Hijazi only happened because the Jordanian state didn't allow the nonviolent option. The will of the Jordanian people says they do not want anything to cross into the Zionist colony from their territory, and people are not allowed. So if now some people you know, take the example of Hijazi and copy it, at one point, maybe the Jordanian government is going to have to stop using Jordanian drivers to drive these trucks. And that means a lot of people out of employment. That means even more pressure on the Jordanian government. You see, so the Jordanian government is in an unattainable situation that they can't resolve their conflict with their own people, and it's going to blow up in their face very soon.
Well, it's, as always, it's been a very enlightening and at times, despite the horrors of what is we were being experienced. I'm going to start that over again. Well, Laith, as always, it's been a very enlightening and, you know, even though it's a horrible moment for us all, even with time to time amusing conversation that we have, we manage to find moments of mirth in the terrible events that we witness every day nowadays. And I thank you as always for joining me, and I look forward to our next conversation.
See you soon, Dimitri.